All right, we're gonna see if this works. All right, Bob.
All right. Good evening and welcome to our second Targeted Topics event for this year. Last month it was, we thought, a well-attended and productive event that we had on Zoom. For those that I was able to email back, I've responded a couple of times, a few emails, and we will continue to do that. So you can continue to reach out to myself and Sean via email. That's really the best way with any questions. So we'll also do that with Nate if you do have any questions for him. But let's go to the next slide, Sean. Okay, the purpose remains the same as last month. Okay, and it's really just to improve the experience for our 4-Hers across the state and anybody else from other states. We had some people from other states. And it's just basically improving the instructor capabilities. It's to help with junior instructors. It's to help with any 4-Hers that are, looking to attend, like tonight's topic, which will be the nationals and state shoot type of questions and lessons learned by Nate. So again, anybody out there, if you have a topic that you're itching to present to the shooting sports across the state, please let Sean and I know, and we'll make sure we get you set up and you can help us with this program. So next slide, Sean. All right, some ground rules. Do you want to cover those, Sean?
Yeah, sure. So again, just similar to last month, please keep your mics muted during the course of the presentation. Should have been automatically done so when you entered the room. And then also, please enter your questions in the chat. And I'll leave it to Nate whether he will address them in due course during the course of his presentation, or whether or not he'll hold off to the more formal Q&A portion at the end. And so we'll take it from there. Next month, right now, the intent for June 20th, 2023 targeted topic will be some past 4-Hers from Wyoming and Dutchess counties who are now engaged in collegiate shooting. Rachel Paddock at Akron University and Elizabeth Gilroy at Liberty University. And they'll be kind of sharing with us some of the little bit more in that realm, which I know absolutely nothing about. So that should be entertaining. And now for tonight's targeted topic for May 2023. Just a quick overview of the national and state championships for the rifle and air rifle disciplines. So Nate, the floor is yours. Go ahead and take control.
Hello, everybody. So we'll get going on this. I'm not the greatest at tech stuff. Why is that not working? It worked when we tried it. Well, welcome. Hopefully we'll get the slideshow up and running a little bit better here. But I'm going to talk about mostly the rifle side of the competitions at the New York State Championship and at the 4-H National Invitational. What we're going to cover is we're going to try to talk a little bit about some of the nomenclature, just so everybody knows what we're talking about when we use certain terminology. There's a lot of terminology that's utilized in the shooting sports, and a lot of it gets specialized. So we just want to be able to know what those things are. Talk about what classifications of rifle, not like classes as in training, but the two major classes of rifles. NGB is the national governing bodies. We'll talk about the different 4-H events in relationship to both rifle and air rifle, and what events are available outside of 4-H. And then a quick talk about what's available as far as equipment goes for people. I got it to work. So the two major classes are precision class and sporter class. Precision class is what you're going to see at the Olympics when you watch them. There's a lot of regulations on the equipment, but it tends to be very expensive. A lot of very specialized equipment. If you happen to enter a precision match and you only have sporter equipment, which we'll talk about in a minute, that's perfectly fine. You're allowed to not have as fancy of equipment, but you cannot shoot precision class equipment in sporter. So we'll cover that next. One quick thing is you'll see an awful lot about precision class on the news, different shooting sports events. In all reality, from a 4-H standpoint, unless you're going to be shooting in competitions outside of 4-H, I would strongly recommend against buying all the equipment for precision class. The complexity is too much to really utilize that if you're not going to be using it for much bigger events. Sporter class, they have both in, well, back up a little bit. You have small bore and air rifles. Small bore is the fancy word for 22s. So sporter class has very strict rules on rifle specifications, but the purpose of it is to make it so it doesn't turn into a who's got the best equipment is going to win. There's a ceiling on price. For air rifles, there's only specific rifles that can be utilized for the events. And you can see the young lady there has one of the more common air rifles. Those cannot cost more than $650. They have limitations. You have to have a little bit heavier trigger pull. It's got to be 1.5 pounds. And the biggest thing, again, is it helps you get entry level with it. To get a gauge, the rifle that young lady is holding, they've just been replaced. You could probably get them for around $500 right now. To get a rifle as accurate as that in 22, you'd be paying at least $3,000 for that rifle. That rifle at 10, 15 meters distance is going to outshoot really any rifle until you get to a heavy targeted bolt barrel. So it's spectacular for teaching youth. So air versus small bore. Again, air is your pellets. In all the competitive arenas, it's going to be 177 caliber and then your 22 rim fire. And then going back to either sporter, which you could see the one lady has a special jacket on, and the gentleman next to her, he is shooting a sporter rifle in a precision competition. So again, that's very common to do. There's only one precision event that's fired in 4-H. So again, the cost is probably not really worth it at this point. National governing bodies, you'll see that listed a lot when you look through the rules and regulations for both the New York State Shooting Sports Championship and the National Championship. Knowing the rules is very, very crucial. A couple of the examples out there is NRA. They sponsor the national governing body for some of our events. CMP is a civilian marksmanship program. There's a 3P Council, which is made up of a number of organizations, including 4-H. So 4-H makes the rules on that. The ISSF, which is International Shooting Sports Foundation, sets the rules for USA Shooting, who does the Olympics, and the NCAA, which is the collegiate. And then you'll see a lot of other ones that are not really specific youth, such as PRC and a few other organizations that just to have an idea. But the biggest thing to look at would be the NRA, the CMP, and the 3P Council for 4-H related events. Where that comes into play and is very important is the rules and even the range commands of the NRA match are going to be very different than those from a CMP or a 3P Council match. So when we're teaching young shooters initially, we have very consistent range commands for them. If they're going to start attending competitions, it's good to learn the range commands that you're going to utilize in some of the other events. Also, the order of shooting can be quite different. So all of these books are available online, fairly easy to find. Sometimes can be a little bit complicated to understand. So if you're coming to the state championship, please ahead of time, if you haven't been to one of these events that's sponsored by that group, I would strongly recommend you talk to whoever's hosting it. So this in past years, Wyoming County had hosted all the events in relationship to rifle. Unfortunately, we will not be able to host the state championship this year. So looks like there's a high likelihood that it will be sponsored by another county, but definitely get a hold of them or myself to discuss the rules. To give kind of an example, we had a group from another county come. They were very gung-ho, very excited to come shoot. They had shot some NRA hunting type events. And because they had shot those events, they felt like they were ready to shoot all the other ones, but very different rules. And so knowing it ahead of time makes it much, much easier, much more fun. So now we'll get into some of the actual events. So within 4-H, 3P is 3 position. That's prone, standing, and kneeling. Prone is laying at your belly. This is both in air, sporter, and in small bore. In small bore, the 3P event is precision, which means if you have the fancy suit and you have the fancy rifle, you can utilize that, but you do not have to have that equipment. The vast majority of kids who are shooting have a Savage Mark II, and they do just perfectly fine in that. We make a little bit of an allowance at the New York State shoot, and we allow magazine fed rifles for the 3P event. If you go to nationals, it has to be a single shot. So for instance, you could still use a Savage Mark I, even though it's a precision event, or if you want to, you can buy the fancy rifle. The rules for these, the NRA has the rules for the small bore event, and the CMP Position Council has the rules for the air 3P event. So you have a differing order of which they are shot. Interestingly, right now, 3P is changing the order that they shoot, which will make them consistent with small bore. So they start kneeling, then they go to prone, and then they go to standing. The reason for that is after you do kneeling, it's really hard to stand up. So going to prone is good. And then you still have your sling on for both kneeling and prone. So that way you don't have to move much equipment. Tom, I think you need to mute. 4-H silhouettes, that's a really fun event. There's a picture of some gentlemen shooting the air match. This silhouettes actually is in both air pistol, small bore pistol, air rifle, small bore rifle, muzzle loading. So they get utilized in a lot of events. The distances vary a little bit. In air, it's 20, 30, 36, and 45 yards. And in small bore, it's 40, 60, 77, and 100 yards. So, but the targets are also bigger in the small bore event. NRA has the rules for both events, and there are some modifications made for 4-H for that. For instance, they have the equipment standard a little bit different for the air rifles, just so that it doesn't turn into a big competitive game for who can afford the fanciest rifle. Standing event, or it's a standing only match, is only an air rifle, and that's sporter only. So you can see these gentlemen. This is actually at the national championship in Nebraska. They're shooting. The gentleman in the center actually medaled in this, and he medaled in silhouettes. I think it was 3 years ago. Interestingly enough, the standing air match is run by the 3 position council rules, and it's very similar to the 3P, other than you don't change positions. Events outside of 4-H, you have the Civilian Marksmanship Program. That's their website there, www.thecmp.org. They have an incredible array of different matches, both postal, where a postal match is you get targets mailed to you. You shoot them at your home range, and then you mail them back or scan them back to the CMP, and you'll get state and national rankings from that. It's a really neat way to get into shooting. Most of our team was just out there last week at the Camp Perry Open, which is a very large national match. It's quite exciting. There they shoot on electronic targets, which if you shoot at the 4-H national match, that's also on electronic targets. Let me go back. As you can see at the very bottom, there's a computer screen, and you see the target that they're shooting at. It's hard to see, but there's a single dot on there. They're actually firing a pellet into that target. They have the same for small bore, and the computer picks up the exact position of the impact of the bullet to within 1/100th of a millimeter, and immediately gives you your score on the computer screen. So you don't have to have a spotting scope. It gets a very, very accurate idea of where you're at, and it keeps a running score for you. From a spectator standpoint, it's really neat because you see the shots in live time, and they simulcast this, meaning it goes across the internet. So your family at home can be watching on their phone. So CMP has a lot of wonderful programs out there, very youth friendly. American Legion also has a program. Both of these have both sporter and precision events. American Legion is very big within New York State. They also have a national match with some very significant college scholarships for people. NRA hosts a number of matches. Unfortunately, they dropped the ball on their competitive end an awful lot, and a lot of competitive shooters have backed away from the NRA matches. For instance, they just got out the medals from the 2019 national championship, so they're running 4 years behind on giving kids their medals. So if you shot it as a freshman or sophomore in high school, once you get in college, they'll mail you your medal. The NCAA has shooting along with collegiate club teams, which the next event we have, we'll be talking about that. But if you have any quick questions, my daughter is here. She can answer any questions in regards to college shooting. USA Shooting, they host the Junior Olympics, which is usually 3 qualifiers shot in New York State, and then you get to go out to the US Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs and compete there. And also a number of local clubs will have smaller matches. If you're gonna go to the national championship, you really want to be affiliated with 1 or 2 of these other organizations just to get more competitive practice in. So let's compare the New York State Championship with the national championship. We do our absolute best to keep the rules very, very similar at the New York State Championship as at the national match. Once in a while, we'll have some variations. For instance, in archery, a lot of the events are made a little bit shorter. In rifle, both rifle events, and air, we stick right to the national championship rules. For small bore, we do make a few variations. A lot of it is based on equipment. We don't want teams to get bumped out of the match because they don't have the proper equipment. So we're on small bore, we're fairly liberal on allowing firearms in that would not be allowed at the national match. So if it's something you're considering going to nationals, if you want to get to that level, please contact us to talk about the equipment standards, because again, what we do at the state shoot for small bore is a little bit different. My advice to you, and this is strong advice, is please study the rules and ask questions before coming. It's not that we're going to disqualify kids, but if your youth come and they know what the rules are ahead of time, they're a heck of a lot more comfortable. They have a whole lot more fun. And if you're having fun and you're comfortable, you tend to do better and it makes it just a better experience. We are always, always, always happy to have a conversation with you to review the rules, to help you find other resources so that when you show up, you're very well prepared. Really, that's the one thing that most teams do not do. They show up and expect to have some changes made to allow them to use equipment that's not appropriate. And sometimes that poses a safety hazard. Some of the safety hazards are surprising. For instance, if you have an air rifle that shoots over 600 feet per second, you're not allowed to use it because it's potential to have airborne lead. And we shoot indoors and that's not allowed. So a lot of rules that may not totally make sense, but we'll be happy to run through the equipment standards with you, roll through practice matches. We do have a video that we're working on getting fully compliant, but because of having to have some ADA compliance things, we can't have it fully posted, but we can definitely share that with you. That has a full air match so you can get a good idea of what's going on. The big thing is don't be intimidated. We want people to participate. We want people to have fun. We want people to succeed. And so please come. You got to be safe. You don't have to be great. We have had many, many people complete a match and have a score of 1 or 2 out of 600. And that's perfectly fine. The key is to be safe, have fun, and learn. And the safe zone is on multiple levels. One, obviously enforce safety with gun handling skills, but it's also a safe zone as far as we're going to work with the kids as best possible to help them have a good, strong, fun event. Equipment comes into a lot of plays. Now, we will generally have a fair amount of equipment for people to borrow: spotting scopes, offhand stands, mats, kneeling rolls. A lot of that equipment we have that people can borrow. So please don't say, oh, I'm not coming because I don't have the right equipment. We'll help you out. Up on the top right-hand side of your screen is what's called an offhand stand. Those are very important. What it allows you to do is set your rifle on that while you're standing and load it. So it is a safety point because it keeps that muzzle down range while they're loading, keeps your ammunition right close by. It helps with accuracy that way because you're not having quite as much movement. And those are something that you can make. We'll have a picture on here a little bit later. Our team used homemade ones made out of PVC for 5, 6, 7 years. And they frankly worked great. A number of the kids complained a lot when we went to the commercially available ones. They just traveled a lot easier. Ammunition is very important. For pellets, they have to be wad cutters, meaning a flat face. For small bore ammo, you want to make sure it functions well in the rifle. Lots of times we'll have ammunition there for kids who didn't bring any, but we can't say for sure if that's going to work well in your rifle. In some of the small bore events, which for some reason my screen skipped the one event. There's another, one of the events is called CMP Rimfire Sporter. That's in the small bore realm. Really, really neat game. And it's a combination of slow fire and rapid fire in both standing, prone, and then you can shoot in kneeling or sitting, whichever you choose to. And it's at 2 different distances, 25 and 50 yards. It's a neat game because you have a huge target. So kids who are very new to shooting will still be hitting paper and still be punching up some scores. But to get a 10X is still a real challenge. So to shoot really, really well takes an amazing shooter. So it's really well designed that way. It was actually designed as an intro to high power shooting, but it's a great program for kids. With that though, because you're having rapid fire, you need to make sure your ammunition functions really well in your rifle. If you have a semi-automatic, we'll have to look into the rules and regulations of with the concealed carry law to see if that's allowed this year. If it is allowed, I would strongly recommend against the semi-auto. It's, again, if legally it's going to be allowed this year, it causes some real problems because you get a ton of jams and you don't get an alibi. Alibi means you get to reshoot because your rifle jammed. If your rifle jams, unfortunately, that's your last shot fired for that little section of the match. So knowing your ammo is really huge. Spotting scopes are important. Binoculars can be used. We do have spotting scopes to borrow, and I believe Duchess has some too. Kneeling rolls, I always bring a big bag of them, and same with shooting mats. And again, if you want to get into precision, they got coats, trousers, and boots. But really, I'll get into the weeds a little bit. You would definitely want to start out as a sporter class, and at least in air, you're going to want to be shooting a 520 or higher before you buy that equipment. Otherwise, it's actually going to make your shooting worse. So I'm not trying to poo-poo precision. It's wonderful. I coach a precision team. We also have a precision team within 4-H. I love it, but if you're just shooting within 4-H, really New York State is not advanced enough to spend the money, for you to spend the money on precision equipment. So if you look on the left, the young lady there, that's actually our first time we went to nationals. You can see the PVC pipe, that's her offhand stand. The lower level allows you to have your pellets close by for kneeling. Then there'd be another one up higher, which you can see the gentleman on the right has. And if you look at what the spotting scope is that he's using, that's actually an IV pole I bought on Amazon for $15 with a clamp that's designed for hanging lighting equipment for DJs with a bar bolted to it and a broken head off of a tripod that holds the offhand stand. So a total of probably $20 for that setup. If you're going to buy it commercially, you'd be well over $300. So with a little bit of ingenuity, you can build some really high quality equipment for next to nothing. So if you do want to purchase it, these are some companies that we utilize quite a bit. Overly, very small business. Robert Oberly is the owner, really good guy, will give you super good advice. Creedmoor and Champion's Choice are a little bit bigger, but their people are almost all past competitive shooters. They know the game, and all three of them, I've met the owners and the people who work there, and they're all super good people. You bring in a gun, we brought in guns expecting to have to, when they're at big matches, expecting to have to spend $300-400, and I've had all three companies fix things for us and say, don't worry about it. So they're good people. They're good people to deal with. They're people you don't mind having your money go towards. Questions we'll go into now. The Wyco Shooting Sports is our email address if you want to send anything to us there. And if you look, you can see the dinosaur. You don't see too many dinosaurs at matches, but they still happen occasionally. So I will open things up to questions.
Nate, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I got quite a few questions. That was awesome. That's great. So let me toss this out there. Maybe Rachel can answer this for me. How does a 4-H'er get intimidated? So if you have someone that's coming in that's not as experienced, that's a very experienced shooter, what do you see on the field of competition? How do they get intimidated? What are the type of things they see that cause that?
I think the one that bothers me the most is when the adult leaders say, I don't think they're ready for competition. They're not a good enough shot. That boils my blood, because again, if you taught these kids through the 4-H curriculum, they're ready to come and compete. They may not know all the little nuances. They may not have all the subtleties down. That can be taught, but they're safe. They've completed the curriculum. They have a right to be on our ranges now. And so I think that's the first part. The second part is kids want to do well. And so there was a strong anti-marksmanship thing within 4-H, and we are about making championship kids, not championship shooters. But teaching an appropriate level of marksmanship in the basic rifle classes, I believe, is also important. And that again falls to the leaders. I'm not talking center X's every single time. I'm talking the kid knows the basic fundamentals of marksmanship that are listed in the 4-H curriculum. Nothing else extra. They don't need to be Olympic shooters. So that's the adult side, where I don't mean to be mean. I've watched too many adults drop the ball and cause harm to kids, and none of us are in it for that. All of us are here for the kids. And so it's just a lack of education on that end. For the kid standpoint, every kid wants to do good. We tend to have a lot of our kids show up and try to talk to the new kids, give them a range orientation, let them take a look at things. I know I've watched you, when you've ran ranges, take a bunch of kids down and you give a thorough range debriefing. All of those things really do an awful lot to help. Actually, I've got a person here who's helped us out with some of your experiences on that.
Especially in the small bore 3P, it can be intimidating when you are a brand new shooter and there are some kids that competing in precision, and just seeing those kind of equipment on the line, and you kind of look at your gun and have bad thoughts. Like, I know when I first started out shooting and I was competing against people shooting precision, it can be very daunting, but just know, just because they have all the fancy equipment, there's still a chance that you can still be really good and even beat them.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing, there's a great thing for the adults to stress, is you're competing against yourself. You know where you were. You come into a match and say, you know what? I'm gonna really try to have a nice smooth trigger squeeze every single time. And if you have a good smooth trigger squeeze 80% of the time, you left a winner. You succeeded. A big thing is to have personal goals, not just scores. Not just, I want to shoot a 500 today, or I want to shoot a 480 today. There's nothing wrong with numeric goals, but performance goals are probably even more important. And so that's one thing that adults can do to really help the kids out. And as range officers, we find those things and help celebrate the kids.
Okay, so this nests into that question. What advice could you give to the new coaches out there, or even some experienced coaches? How can they gain some more experience? Are there some courses they can take, go to events? What advice would you give someone to gain more coaching experience?
If you want to look for events, zip me an email and I'll help you find some stuff nearby. They still have openings. If anybody they need a little bit of competitive experience, but not much. Civilian Marksmanship Program is having a camp in Perry, New York, my hometown, that our club is sponsoring them coming out. That is amazing, top of the line, incredible coaching. You don't have to be an amazing shooter to be there. You just got to be safe. And they have training for coaches at that too. Really, really amazing training.
Okay.
If you want to come by, we'll help train you. Well, you can come to any of our practices. You can bring kids to our practices. Just if the kids are going to shoot, your educator needs to talk to our educator to make everything all happy. But we're happy to help out that way, any way we can. We can get you in touch with different American Legion clubs in the state. They're all very good at helping out too. They're gung ho, really want to help kids out.
Okay. In addition to the, I don't see much in the chat box, so I made a list of questions that I think a bunch of people would be interested in. So in a lot of these events, can you tell me, for instance, a 3P event versus a precision event versus whatever event you want to plug in there, are the coaches allowed to coach while they're firing, or does it stop the minute the trigger is pulled? Is it as soon as they enter the line, or is it different for all of them?
So there's some variations. The general rule is for air rifle during sighting, a coach can come up and assist their shooter. They can't do anything to disturb the people nearby. Small bore, generally, once the line of fire is called hot, they can't get near it. The coaches have to stay back. I know personal practice, and I've seen many other ranges do this. If you have a kid, it's their first time, they will squad them, meaning they'll put them, say there's 10 points of fire, they'll put them on number 1 or number 10. That way there's a little bit more space. And they'll say, hey, coach, you can go up there, stay by your kid, stay on the other side of them so you don't disturb any of the other competitors. Keep it quiet, because we're there to facilitate success. And I've seen that at big matches, kids first time coming to a big match out of Camp Perry, Ohio, and the range officers are like, this happened with me and my daughter. I'm like, hey, this is her first time shooting this. Do you mind if I go up there and help her for a second? They're like, oh, absolutely. So the rules say no, but the range officers have latitude, and that's actually in the CMP rules, that the range officer has latitude to allow additional coaching for new people.
Okay. So questions, stuff that you brought up that brought questions to my mind. So when you do the check-in, the safety check-in, I know we saw a video a couple months back, or a month or so back, of some unsafe practice. So, obviously you got to be safe when you're checking in. And like you said, they make sure that happens at nationals. Every time you've been there, they do a really good job at that. But my question is did they determine, so you made a comment about the speed of the pellet, if it's faster than 600 feet per second for the air rifle competition, they're not allowed to use it. How did they determine that? Did they just know that X rifle will shoot higher than 600? Do they have a chronograph? How did they determine that?
Great question. For Sporter air rifle, there's a list of like 6 or 7 rifles that are approved for use. If it's not approved for use, you can't use it. So Crosman Challenger, there's 3 of them. There's the 2000, the 2009, and 2021. That's what you're going to see 99% of the kids using are those. Those are all underneath that speed. They can be modified to go higher, but there's generally the only time that would be beneficial is in silhouettes, and the range officer would hear that and you'd be disqualified because for violating the rules. There's a few other ones. Once in a great while, you'll see Daisy has a 599. There's a few Daisy rifles you'll see out there, but all the ones that are approved are under that speed. And if you look on the 4-H rules and regulations for the national and state match, it has a list of what rifles are approved. And if you look at the 3P Council's rules, they'll also have what's approved. So great question.
So if someone's shooting an air rifle at a competition, I believe you said the referee or the safety would hear it. What were you talking about? Like the contact after it's shot, it's hitting the target and it's much louder than the other rifles. Is that it?
I've never actually seen one modified.
Okay.
From what I was told, it makes more of a cracking sound when you fire it.
Okay.
really, a lot of these are tuned. If you think about high power shooting, you spend forever fine tuning your load with the right weight bullet and the amount of speed and powder and primer and all of that. With the air rifles, because they're so crazy accurate. They're designed to shoot a very lightweight pellet at a slower speed. If you put a heavier pellet in, or you go to a higher speed, you're gonna lose a lot of accuracy. So fortunately, there's really not a impetus for people to try to game the system with that, because it would make them lose matches.
Okay, so again, I don't see many questions. If people want to ask, just jump in, but I got another one. Sorry, guys, lots of questions. It was an excellent presentation. So like mats, are they pretty much standard, or they can't be over a certain thickness and a certain length?
Length is not an issue. Width can be a little bit of an issue, just depending on the range you're at. If you're stacking them like cordwood, they're going to be overlapping the kids next to them. There is a thickness rule on it. I've never seen a mat that violated it. In fact, our mats, we can double up and they're still under the regulation. Do you know how thick it is?
I want to say 2 inches.
Yeah, so it might be allowed up to almost 2 inches of thickness. So,
Okay,
and as far as that goes, that's actually a good jump in. You don't need fancy equipment. One of the best competitors we know, we went to shoot with one day, and he went over to the dumpster, leaned in, pulled out a piece of cardboard, walked over, threw that down on the ground, and that's what he used for a shooting mat.
Mhm.
And he outshot everybody on the range that day.
Okay.
And so, it's, you don't need a gold trigger for shotgun, and you don't need a $300 shooting mat. A chunk of cardboard works pretty good. Just don't let it get wet.
So is that pretty, so talk to me about the kneeling rolls. They can only be a certain size?
Yes, I believe 7-inch diameter. It's in the rule book. You won't see
Okay.
too many of them bigger than that. There's some really good websites for making them homemade.
Okay,
Initially, you can roll up some carpet. Unfortunately, that tends to compress as you get to be better at shooting. But early on, until you start really cranking up some scores, it's not going to matter. Get some old carpet, roll it up, make it 6 inches. That way, you know you're under the rules. You can make them. We still use a couple homemade bags. They're get some Cordura and sew them up. If you got people who are handy with that, that works really well.
what do you guys recommend if you do make it? What are you stuffing it with? Sand, Drysol? I mean, what are you guys using?
Your best bet is if you can get a hold of a place that does injection molding. They have little tiny plastic beads for injection molding.
Okay,
And if you find a place that has that, let me know, because it would be really nice to find some. Champion's Choice, no, Creedmoor sells those beads. That's the ideal one, because if it gets wet, it doesn't sprout and mold like seeds do. It won't compress once you get your leg on that. It won't compress anymore. Sand will continue to compress and it leaks out. My one daughter has some sand in hers, and it sprung a leak, and we opened up her equipment bag, and it looked like she just got back from the desert. It's not good. Seeds we've used quite a few times. Beans work great. From my understanding, the international shooters, because air travel is so expensive with weight, they bring an empty bag and they buy a big bag of rice and they pack it full of rice and get it set for them when they get to the match. We've used corn for quite a while. Once it starts to sprout, it smells bad. So change your corn out before it sprouts.
okay. So let me ask both of you while you're sitting there, what was your favorite part of attending nationals? What did you pleasantly were maybe surprised by, or was your favorite part of nationals?
So one of my favorites was it was during the award ceremony, and I went in 2021, and so COVID had lots of regulations, and normally before at the award ceremony they call down everyone who competed, and they stand in two lines facing each other, and as they call the competitors who have placed, they run through and high five everyone's hands. Well, we weren't allowed to do that because of COVID. Instead, we had little X's where you had to stand with your state. And when I got called up for three position, I like walked over and like there were still people like high-fiving and saying that you did a good job despite the regulations, and it was just heartwarming. And these are people that like I've never known before, and then like afterwards like coming up and being like, hey, you did a great job. And it's like even like at the grocery store afterwards, it's like we're walking around wearing our New York polos, and people from the competition would recognize that like, oh, you're from New York, great job, you came a
Awesome.
far way and did good.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, I love meeting people from all around and finding out what people do in other states, different events they do. It's incredible. Texas's state championship is, I believe, 11 days long. They have, I think, 10 different shotgun events. It's pretty wild to get to talk to people from all around the country. They have a lot of social events where you get to meet kids and other adults from around the country. They trade pins, so you end up. It's a great way to end. You've got a good reason to come up. You got a group of kids from South Carolina. You want to South Carolina, yeah. You see some people from South Carolina. So here's her stuffed animal, and you can see pins from all the different states on it. And so it's a fun way to go talk to them. You're from New York, so you can let them think it. You shoot from one skyscraper to the next, and we all have to take the subway to school. Here's all the pins for my other daughter. It's fun, and people really think we all live in skyscrapers and that we shoot from one window across Fifth Avenue to the next side. But and then eventually you can show them some pictures of what it really looks like in the majority of New York.
Great. So, hey, any other questions out there for Nate, Sean? I see you have the video. Is that can you show that?
Yeah, I can. But before I do, the one thing I did want to add, just kind of going back to the first question there. The one thing I would encourage from a competitive standpoint that the clubs make sure they do before, they bring any 4-H'er to a state, let alone a national competition is run one of your internal club ones first, kind of get them used to that stress, because I've seen a lot of 4-H'ers who are magnificent shots when you're just having like an open range and they're just shooting and working on their skill set. But the moment you add that, oh my goodness, I'm doing a competition, and the next thing you know, you start just like an exam in school, you start putting stress on yourself, they fall apart. And I've seen it happen at the national, kids I know who are solid shots, and just you add that element of stress, and they fall apart that first time they're up there. Once they get a couple reps under their belt, totally different story. But I definitely would encourage the clubs to do that. So with that said, yeah, Bob, I can go ahead and share it if you think now's a good time to do it.
Yeah, let's show that video. That'd be great.
Okay, so let's see. I'm just going to try and share the window here. All right, can everybody see that? All right, Bob, I don't know if you want to go ahead and provide the commentary for this. This gets kind of entertaining.
You can do it, Sean. Go ahead.
All right.
So really, this is just some footage of their match, but I think we just want to bring back the attention when it's over, Sean, the first, 30 seconds when they uncase the air
Yeah.
rifle.
We'll just go ahead and we'll take it right back to the beginning because the rest of that's just kind of like the
Right.
not so entertaining part.
So I think what we're trying to bring to attention is,
Right up there.
safe firearms handling and not flagging is important. Nate will add on to this when I'm done. Certainly when you take a firearm out of the case, we don't know what state it's in. And when she pulls them out, I think almost twice she flags the safeties that are behind the table. Watch this one right here. She flags both of them right there.
And there's no CBI in the rifle.
Right.
So,
And you don't know the state of the firearm when it comes into the facility. For all it could be loaded.
Right there.
Yeah.
yeah. So one of the things that we do is we mark which end of the case has the muzzle. So there's an extra piece of duct tape at that end. So that way, when you open the case, you already have the case aligned. So that muzzle is pointing the direction you want it. So,
Right.
uh,
So
situation.
at these events, Nate, do they designate for you what that state direction is, or
Honestly, if you pull the rifle out of a case without a CBI in like that, I'm amazed there wasn't 6 people screaming because the generally a pretty solid group of, everybody wants this to be super, super safe. You will definitely see some events, not so much 4-H, fortunately, but some high school events and some of the bigger national events where once a CBI is in, you'll end up seeing some people get flagged from time to time. They won't be holding it towards them, but they'll have rifles out on tables that will get picked up and briefly be there. So that's not ideal. I don't like it. It's like when you go to a gun show and you've got guns everywhere and people everywhere. It just
Yeah.
is not a good feeling.
okay? Well, it's at the end of the day, what are we always trying to do? Inculcate a culture that safety is everything. And I just recently received a text from a friend that was attending a pistol firing course up in New Hampshire. I think it's at I forgot which academy's up there. This might have been SIG, I think. Anyhow, up in New Hampshire, and they actually showed. They talked about youth shooting sports, and they went into the numbers of people that were injured, like 5 to 14 years old. I think it was like 275,000 injured on bikes each year. Basketball was like 175,000, and you got all these sports, and it goes down the line, and to include soccer, and it was trampolines, and it's tens of thousands a year. And then it gets to 4-H shooting sports, and it claims that in our 32-year existence in 4-H shooting sports, they've had 5 accidents. They didn't indicate any fatalities, but over 32 years, 5 incidents, that of any significance that were reported. So, that's that culture of safety, and some people think you're overreacting, but if it's keeping people safe, it's not overreacting.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah.
So we got some questions.
Chamber flags and CBIs, just to reiterate, even though this is basic, if it's a small bore rifle, 22, your chamber has to have a flag in it. And if it's an air rifle, you have to have weed eater string extending out the end of the muzzle and out the action both. It has to be all the way through and visible from both ends. And that's before it comes out of the case. Those have to be inserted. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Okay. Sean, any questions?
No, I got nothing to add.
Well, certainly we can talk about what Nate referenced, the state shoot. So We're making attempts right now to have an alternative location for the state shoot. We think it's important, along with many of the clubs across the state, to make sure that the opportunity is there for our youth to compete. Because it sets the conditions, as you said before, to make winning kids, and you got to give them that opportunity. Every county gives the opportunity to our 4-Hers to make sure they can show their beef and their goats and their chickens and their canines and their horses, etc., etc. So we need to do that at the state level. And again, awesome job all those years, Nate, in Wyoming County. We can't thank you enough. It's unfortunately sad that the facility was sold, but I understand there might be some great things in the future that will come out of that for your county. But you guys have always run a super top quality event. The Paddock family, we owe a lot to you guys. You put on a great feed while everybody's there. You make sure the thing goes off like clockwork. And like you said, there's a whole lot of stinking hard work that went into that by a lot of people. But again, we got to thank you guys, because you really have championed the state shoot and bore a lot of the weight of that for many, many years. And you have a huge organization behind you across the state, that I know once we found out that it was there, that we want to support you and make it work. So I know we'll have that same level of support wherever we move it to. So I know we just had the shotgun and muzzleloader. What else was there, Sean? I know those 2 events. Was that it? Just those 2 events?
The hunting event, the hunting program.
Okay. All right. So I know they just had that, and I heard it went off well. So, we have to complete that circle and make sure that we give the opportunity for our kids to do the archery, to do the air rifle, to do the small bore events. And we're going to try everything we can to make that happen.
So obviously, more to follow.
Yep.
So I've got 8 o'clock. We want to do our best to respect everybody's time and make sure we keep these to approximately 1 hour. So last call, so to speak, on any lingering questions out there.
So I guess, Nate, before we close it, I know this can be an expensive ordeal for anybody attending. You guys have gone to many of these things, and it gets quite pricey, from where you have to stay, feeding yourself the entire time, transporting yourself to and from, and other associated costs I'm probably not even thinking about.
It becomes our vacations, and so we vacation at different ranges. But fortunately, my wife is spectacular at logistics for keeping the food costs down, and there are ways to do this competitively and keep your prices down. So again, anybody's got individual questions, shoot me an email. Once we connect via email, we can talk on the phone, whatever's best. We will help anybody who wants to get some additional marksmanship training, some practice matches, any of that. We're happy to help out. The more a kid feels comfortable coming into the event, the more fun they're going to have.
Outstanding. So, I mean, for our instructors out there and our junior instructors and our 4-Hers, I'll do a check on learning for myself. So what did I learn tonight? So, not even realizing it, Nate, now you've made me now have to go to my rifle cases, and I'm going to mark every case so I know exactly where that muzzle is going to be. All right. So it's these little things that, again, might seem insignificant to you or to me for whatever, but you tell me that, I'm like, man, that's awesome. I thought I was the smartest guy in the room, but obviously you can always learn. You just got to keep your ears open, and there you go. So I'll be doing that with our cases, that's for sure. Anything, Sean?
Nothing else other than just a reminder, our next targeted topics will be June 20th. And we'll be discussing with some of our past 4-Hers some collegiate shooting and some lessons learned from there and how their 4-H experiences help prepare them for that part of their lives.
Yep. Anything, Nate, you want to close out with?
No, thank you guys. I greatly appreciate it. This has been an awesome venue for information sharing.
Agreed 100%. Well, thanks everybody for zooming in tonight. We probably had about 20 people, 25, given 15 or so participants, but some of them had 2 people on screen. So, hey, we don't care if it's only 4 or 5 people, but the bottom line is we need to get the word out on these things and just have great informative topics. Again, thank you so much, Nate, for helping us out tonight, guys. I enjoyed it and certainly learned some things here. So you'll get some more questions from me. But like everybody said, if you want to get in on that CMP coach training, correct? You have a few slots left, right, Nate?
Yeah, and you can go to www.thecmp.org and go to junior rifle camps. And it's the Perry, New York camp. I believe it's camp number 11. The big thing about that is it's going to cut your travel costs, and cost of living where we are is quite a bit cheaper than where most of the other camps are being held.
And what was the date on that again, Nate?
It is it's July 30th through the first Friday in August. Let me take a look real quick to get you a better number.
July 30th through August 4th.
Okay, so if someone was to come to that and they could only make a couple of days of it, is that acceptable? Or do you have to
No.
be there the whole time? Okay.
Yeah, you would it's a pretty formalized thing. For instance, the first time we went, the lead coach became the Olympic coach 6 weeks afterwards. It's that level of instruction. It's
Okay.
incredible.
And
Great.
every individual counselor is at least a D1 rifle athlete.
So these are all kids who shot good enough that they're getting college paid for shooting.
Okay.
And that's your lowest level counselor there.
All right. Outstanding. All right. Well, I have nothing else unless anybody else one more time, Sean.
I see no other messages in the chat. So thank you everybody for coming out this evening. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.